Westley Brooks leaned back in his leather chair, staring at the neat stack of invitations on his desk. Another fundraiser, another night of plastered smiles and rehearsed small talk. His assistant had been relentless, insisting that this one mattered, that the event's mission aligned perfectly with the company's philanthropic division. Westley sighed. 2 hours, he promised himself, no more. After that, he'd escape back to the quiet comfort of his home. When he arrived, the room was exactly as he expected. Polished marble floors, glittering chandeliers, and a sea of tailored suits and sequined gowns. Waiters floated between clusters of guests with trays of champagne, and the buzz of conversation filled the air. He shook a few hands, nodded at familiar faces, and moved toward the bar. The night would be routine, predictable, and then his breath caught. Across the room, as though time had folded in on itself, stood Imani Hilton. It had been 5 years since San Diego, 5 years since he had seen her walk across that conference stage with a confidence that lit up the entire auditorium. She hadn't changed. Her hair was pulled back in an elegant twist, her gown a deep emerald that seemed to pull the light toward her. She was laughing at something someone had said, her head tilting just the way he remembered. For a moment, Westley forgot where he was. The fundraiser faded, the clinking glasses and chatter slipping into a dull hum. All he saw was Imani, every detail, every memory rushing back. He had never expected to see her again. They'd kept things professional back then, though he couldn't deny the spark he felt. He told himself it was timing, that they were both too focused on their careers to let anything personal complicate their lives. And then life carried them, in separate directions. Now, here she was. Imani must have felt his stare, because her gaze shifted across the room and landed on him. For a heartbeat, she froze. Recognition softened her expression, and her lips curved into a surprised smile. Westley's chest tightened. He hadn't prepared for this, hadn't prepared for the way her presence could undo him so easily. Straightening his shoulders, he placed his drink on the bar and started toward her, weaving through the crowd. He could leave tonight with nothing more than polite conversation, or he could risk reopening a door he had once shut. Either way, he knew one thing for certain: this fundraiser would not be routine. Not anymore. Westley stopped a few feet away, his eyes still caught in the spell of recognition. Imani's smile widened as she stepped forward. "Westley Brooks," she said softly, almost testing his name as though to confirm he was real. "Imani Hilton," he replied, his voice warm, his gaze steady. "You look beautiful." Her cheeks flushed slightly, though she tilted her head with playful confidence. "It's been a long time." "Too long," Westley admitted. He cleared his throat, steadying himself. "How long will you be in New York?" Imani's eyes flickered with surprise. "Actually, I just moved here a few days ago, still surrounded by boxes. I should have warned my neighbors. I might be living out of them for weeks." Westley chuckled, leaning in just enough for his baritone voice to lower. "Well, I'm pretty good at picking up heavy stuff." Her laugh was as bright as he remembered, filling the space between them. "Good to know," she teased. "I'm going to make sure you do." And just like that, Westley felt himself sliding back into her orbit, drawn to her in a way that felt both dangerous and inevitable. "So," he asked, slipping into the role of conversationalist but genuinely curious, "what are your plans now that you're here?" Imani's eyes softened, her tone turning thoughtful. "I'm starting a non-profit, a group designed to help disadvantaged women learn financial and strategic planning, how to build something sustainable for themselves and their families. Too many brilliant women are boxed out of opportunities because no one teaches them the rules." Westley's respect for her deepened instantly. He nodded, the corners of his lips lifting. "That's great, Imani. That's you. Always thinking bigger than yourself." Her lips curved, touched by his sincerity. "So, Westley leaned closer, lowering his voice into something teasing. "When do you want me over to help with those boxes?" Imani laughed again, a sound he didn't realize he had missed until now. "How about tomorrow morning? I'll fix breakfast. Before we start." He grinned, unable to resist the opening. "So, I stay the night." She arched an eyebrow, leaning toward him just enough that the scent of her perfume brushed against his memory. "Not without a ring," she said softly, her eyes locked on his. Wesley's grin widened, more genuine than he had felt in years. "Just give me a little time, we can make it happen." Imani blinked, studying him carefully. "Oh, wow," she whispered. "You've changed in the last 5 years." "I have," he admitted, his voice steady with a conviction that surprised even him, "because I finally know what I've been missing." A silence stretched between them, electric and unspoken, while the chatter of the fundraiser hummed on. Around them, she looked at him as though searching for the boy she had once known, only to find a man standing in his place, more certain, more present, and undeniably still drawn to her. For Westley, the rest of the night no longer mattered. The speeches, the donors, the carefully planned agenda, he had already found the reason he was meant to be here. Westley offered his arm, and Imani slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow, as if it had always belonged there. He guided her through the glittering room, introducing her to the board. "Members and donors she might one day need to know. This is Imani Hilton," Westley said with quiet pride more than once. "She's just moved to New York and is starting a non-profit for women in financial literacy and strategy." Each time, Imani greeted them with that natural poise he remembered so well, calm, articulate, but never rehearsed. The men nodded. With interest, the women smiled warmly, and more than one person told her they'd love to learn more about her work. Westley noticed the spark in her eyes as she spoke of her vision. She was in her element, and he couldn't help admiring her all over again. When the music shifted to a softer tempo, Westley leaned down. "Dance with me?" Imani tilted her head, pretending to deliberate, before a smile tugged at her lips. "Why not?" On the dance floor, his hand found the small of her back, hers resting lightly against his shoulder. They swayed with the rhythm, closer than they had any right to be in such a public setting. Around them, the world blurred into glittering, lights and muted laughter. "It feels like San Diego all over again," Imani murmured, her eyes searching his. Wesley's lips curved. "Except this time I'm not going to let you walk away without knowing where you're headed next." She laughed, shaking her head. "We were younger then. I was buried in deadlines, and you were halfway married to your company. And you were the distraction I didn't know how much I needed," he said honestly, his voice low. Her gaze softened, memories flickering across her face. "I still remember that dinner by the pier," she said. "You wouldn't stop talking about expanding into renewable energy, and I was trying to convince you to order dessert." "I should have," Westley admitted. "I should have said yes to more things back then." Her hand tightened slightly on his shoulder, a subtle acknowledgement of the weight in his words. The song ended, but neither of them moved away immediately. It was as if the years had folded in on themselves, leaving only two people rediscovering what they had once left unfinished. For Westley, one truth became impossible to deny. Imani wasn't just a familiar face from the past. She was the possibility of something new. Something worth chasing this time. Morning sunlight poured through the tall windows of Imani's new apartment, casting warm streaks across the hardwood floors. Boxes were stacked like miniature towers against the walls, half labeled, half forgotten. The smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen, mingling with the faint sound of a skillet sizzling. Westley, sleeves rolled up, leaned against the counter as Imani flipped pancakes with practiced ease. She wore a soft, oversized t-shirt knotted at her waist and leggings, her hair tied back casually. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this comfortable around someone so quickly. "You know," Westley said, watching her with an amused smile. I can lift heavy things, but pancakes? This feels like a bonus I didn't negotiate for. She laughed, sliding a plate toward him. Consider it part of your payment package, breakfast before manual labor. They carried their plates to the small table near the window, sitting across from each other. Between bites and sips of coffee, the conversation flowed easily. Memories, jokes, and the little pieces of themselves they hadn't shared in years. So, Imani said, resting her chin on her hand, what was little Westley Brooks like? Before the suits, before the empire, he chuckled, stabbing a forkful of pancake. Restless, always wanting more. I grew up in a house where achievement was the only love language. If I could tell my younger self anything, it would be, don't chase approval so hard. It's a moving target. Her eyes softened. That sounds heavy for a kid. It was, he admitted, but it made me who I am. Still, I wish I'd known that happiness doesn't always come with a paycheck or a title. Imani grew quiet, her gaze drifting toward the sunlight. For me, it was the opposite. My childhood was full of love, but too much shelter. My parents wanted to protect me from every fall, every disappointment. If I could tell little Imani something, it would be, don't be afraid to fail. Don't wait until you're grown to take risks. Westley leaned back, studying her. And here you are, starting a non-profit from scratch. That doesn't sound like someone afraid of failing. She smiled, but there was a hint of vulnerability beneath it. I had to unlearn that fear. Every box I've unpacked in life has been a reminder that I'm stronger than I thought. He set down his fork, his tone softening. That's one of the things I always admired about you, even back then. You see possibility where most people see walls. Her laughter was quiet, touched with sincerity. Careful, Brooks, you're going to make unpacking feel poetic. Maybe it is, he teased. Every box we unpack here is one less thing holding you back. The room fell into a comfortable silence, broken only by the sound of forks scraping plates. For Westley, the morning felt like more than just breakfast. It was a glimpse into something he hadn't realized he wanted. A home, shared moments, and the kind of honesty that made the weight of years dissolve. And as the day stretched ahead, with boxes to move and memories to unbox, he knew one thing for certain. He didn't just want to help her settle into New York. He wanted to be part of the life she was building here. The knock on the door came just as Westley was carrying another box toward the bedroom. Imani frowned, wiping her hands on a dish towel as she moved to answer it. When the door swung open, her breath hitched. "Luther," she whispered. Her ex-boyfriend stood there tall and tense, his jaw set tight. Before she could say another word, he pushed past her into the apartment, his presence filling the space with a stormy energy. "We need to talk," he demanded, eyes blazing. Imani's spine stiffened. "You don't get to barge into my home, Luther." But then his gaze shifted, locking onto Westley, who had just set down the box. His expression darkened. "And who the hell is this? Get out." Westley, calm but firm, stepped forward, his voice steady. "This is Imani's apartment. If she wants to talk to you, that's her choice, but I'm not leaving." He glanced at her gently. "I'll be in the bedroom if you need me." The refusal only fueled Luther's anger. He jabbed a finger toward Westley. "So you already moved on, huh? That's what this is?" Imani folded her arms, her voice sharp. "Why are you here, Luther? We broke up 2 months ago." "Did you forget about Maria?" She pressed on, her voice rising with conviction. "The woman you got pregnant." Luther's face tightened. "That wouldn't have happened if you spent more time with me. You were always gone, weeks at a time, chasing your own ambitions while I—" She cut him off, eyes blazing. "And now that's not a problem anymore. You have all the freedom in the world to do whatever you want without me standing in your way." Luther's voice cracked, his anger laced with desperation. "I never said I didn't want you. Baby, I love you. For a heartbeat, silence hung in the room. Then, to his shock, Imani laughed. It wasn't light, it was a laugh laced with disbelief and finality. She doubled over, shaking her head, the sound echoing through the half-unpacked apartment. "You don't get to stand here and tell me you love me after betraying me," she said finally, her tone biting. "Love isn't excuses, Luther. Love isn't blaming me for your mistakes." His face flushed crimson. He stepped forward, closing the space between them, his breath harsh and uneven. His fists flexed at his sides, and for a split second, Westley moved, as if ready to intervene. But Imani didn't flinch. She lifted her chin, eyes locked on Luther's, her voice steady. "Go ahead. I dare you to touch me." The challenge froze him. His nostrils flared, his chest heaved with ragged breaths, but he didn't move. He stood there for a long moment, glaring at her with a mix of rage and regret. Then finally, with a harsh exhale, he turned on his heel and stormed out, the door slamming behind him. Silence filled the apartment once more. Imani's shoulders relaxed, though her hands trembled slightly. From the doorway to the hall, Westley stepped back into view. He didn't rush her, didn't overwhelm her with questions. He simply looked at her with quiet steadiness, as if to remind her she wasn't facing storms alone anymore. And for the first time in a long while, Imani realized she believed it. Imani stood frozen, chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. The adrenaline still thrummed in her veins, but her body was trembling in the silence that followed. Westley crossed the room slowly, careful not to overwhelm her. He reached for her hands, gently prying her clenched fists open. "Hey," he said softly, his eyes steady on hers. "You don't have to hold all of that inside." Her lips parted, and for a moment she didn't trust her own voice. But then, with a shaky laugh, she said, "I thought I was past all of this, past him, and yet seeing Luther again made me feel like I was right back where I swore I'd never be." Westley squeezed her hands, grounding her. "You are past it. The fact that you stood your ground, that you didn't let him pull you back in, that says everything." She blinked back sudden tears, shaking her head. "It's just, he knows how to twist things, to make me feel guilty, like I was the problem." Wesley's thumb brushed against her knuckles, warm and deliberate. "That's not love, Imani. That's manipulation. You don't deserve that. What you do deserve," he leaned closer, lowering his voice, "is someone who sees you for exactly who you are and chooses you anyway, every single day." Her throat tightened, but she nodded, taking a deep breath. "Thank you for not leaving, for standing there." His smile was faint but certain. "I told you, I'm not going anywhere unless you ask me to." For the first time since the knock on the door, she let herself relax. She rested her forehead lightly against his chest, allowing herself to be held, and in that quiet embrace, she realized that Westley wasn't just words. He was action. He was presence. Meanwhile, Luther sat in his car across the street, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles whitened. His chest still heaved with the remnants of anger, but beneath it simmered something darker: humiliation. She had laughed at him, in his face. The memory stung worse than any rejection he'd felt before. And then there was the man, the stranger standing in her apartment like he belonged there. Luther's jaw clenched as he replayed the sight. Westley's calm defiance had been infuriating, as if the man was already claiming a place Luther wasn't. Ready to give up, he slammed his hand against the steering wheel, cursing under his breath. She thinks it's over, but she doesn't get to just walk away. His phone buzzed, and a message from Maria lit up the screen. "Doctor's appointment tomorrow. Don't be late this time." Luther stared at the text, torn between obligations he didn't want and a woman he still couldn't let go of. His pride burned too hot, his ego too bruised. One thing was certain: he wasn't done with Imani. Not yet. Wesley's jaw tightened as he replayed Luther barging into Imani's apartment. The memory left a bitter taste, one that refused to leave him. After Imani had calmed down, he spoke with quiet certainty. "He hunted you out and walked in here like he owned the place," Westley said, his voice steady but firm. "He's not. Finished. He'll be back." He met her eyes, unflinching. "Please stay at my place tonight, just a few days, until we know he's gone back to San Diego." Imani hesitated, but something in Wesley's tone, the mixture of concern and resolve, broke through her pride. She nodded slowly. "All right. Just a few days." At his home, he led her upstairs and opened the door to a spacious guest room. "This is yours," he said. "Stay as long as you need. I'll give you space tonight." Her heart warmed at the thoughtfulness. "Thank you, Westley. Really." He offered a small smile before retreating to his own room. The next morning, Imani awoke to the smell of freshly brewed coffee. Padding into the kitchen, she found 2 mugs waiting on the counter. Beside them sat a neatly folded note in Wesley's precise handwriting. "Just in case you need me today, here's my schedule. Don't hesitate to call. W." Imani smiled, tucking the note into her bag before heading off to work. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of calm, a fragile but hopeful reprieve from the chaos Luther had dragged into her life. Meanwhile, on the other side of the country, Luther slumped into his San Diego apartment. He hadn't wanted to leave New York, but work and Maria's pregnancy had forced him to. Still, he couldn't shake the image of that man standing in Imani's apartment like a shield. Who was he? That question gnawed at him. 2 weeks later, his phone buzzed. The detective he'd hired leaned against a car outside Luther's office, handing him a thick envelope. "Everything you asked for. His name is Westley Brooks." Luther flipped through the file, his eyes narrowing at the details. CEO, successful, influential, respected. "So that's who she moved on with," Luther muttered, bitterness coating every word. He snapped the folder shut. "Good. Now I know exactly who I'm up against." And in that moment, his anger hardened into resolve. If Westley Brooks thought he could take Imani from him, he was in for a fight Luther had no intention of losing. The evening was quiet in Wesley's penthouse, the city lights glowing through the wide glass windows like scattered jewels. He and Imani sat on the sofa with mugs of tea between them, the silence soft, companionable, until Wesley broke it. "Gently, tell me about him," he said, his voice calm but steady. "I need to understand what you were dealing with." Imani stared into her cup, swirling the tea as if the steam might give her the words. Finally, she exhaled. "Luther wasn't controlling at first. Not until I left him behind for conferences. Business trips weeks at a time. I think he was hoping to rise to fame on my coattail. We were never really serious in his mind." She gave a small, rueful smile. "I was hoping we'd be." Wesley tilted his head. "But you started seeing things differently." She nodded. "Yes, when I came back from week-long events, there were little things, subtle at first, like furniture rearranged, clothes that weren't mine, wine glasses in the sink when I hadn't been home. When I asked, he told me I was imagining it, creating storylines in my head." Her tone hardened. "It made me question myself, and that's when the control started. He'd say I was too busy for him, too ambitious, that I wasn't present enough." Wesley's jaw tightened, but he let her continue. "All the while," she said, her voice dropping, "he had Maria. He was bringing her over when I was gone. I caught them once, by accident. I came home early, dragging my suitcase behind. Me, exhausted but excited to surprise him, and there she was, answering his door." Wesley leaned forward. "What did she say?" Imani's lips pressed into a thin line, but she forced herself to relive it. "She looked me in the eye and asked who I was. Can you believe that? Then she smiled and said they were together, and she was expecting." A bitter laugh escaped. "Her." I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just said congratulations. Then I looked Luther in the eye and told him I hoped he'd do right by his family, and I walked out. Westley's hand brushed over hers, grounding her. And he kept coming after. Yes, he wouldn't let it go, showed up at my place with excuses, half-truths, anything to make me stay. But I'd already seen enough. Once the trust is broken, there's no stitching it back together. That's when I decided to move here, to start over before he dragged me down further. Her voice cracked slightly at the last words, but Westley reached over and clasped her hand fully. You didn't run away, Imani. You chose yourself. That's strength, and you're not alone this time. Imani looked at him, her eyes shining, and for the first time in years, she believed it. The city lights reflected against the glass, but inside that room, a new kind of light glowed, born not from ambition or fear, but from honesty and the quiet possibility of healing. Imani was curled comfortably on the sofa, laptop balanced on her knees, scrolling through documents for her non-profit launch when the sound of high heels clicked against marble floors. She frowned, closing her laptop and standing just as the elevator doors to Westley's penthouse slid open. Rachel Taylor stepped out like she owned the place, dressed in a designer dress that clung to her like a second skin, her chin tilted in arrogant triumph. She scanned the room until her gaze landed on Imani. Well, well, Rachel purred, striding closer. The rumors are true. You're trying to steal my fiancé. Imani blinked, utterly confused. Excuse me? Who are you? Rachel let out a sharp laugh, flipping her hair. I'm the woman who's come back to claim her man. You need to pack your things and leave now. Before Imani could respond, a door down the hallway creaked open. Westley, having overheard the noise from his home office, stepped out with a stormy look on his face. Rachel's eyes lit up. Darling, she exclaimed, rushing toward him as though the last year had vanished. I'm so glad to see you. When I heard about this imposter, I came as soon as I could. Westley's brow furrowed in disbelief. What the hell, Rachel? Why are you here? I came to see about you, she replied quickly, her voice sugary but sharp beneath the surface. He folded his arms. Rachel, we broke up a year ago. You should have stayed gone. Her smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. You should have come for me. But then I get a phone call saying you were in trouble. So I came. I had to. Westley's voice hardened. I am not your problem, and how in the hell did you even get in here? Rachel smirked and held up a sleek keycard. I still had an access card. Not anymore, Westley snapped. Hand it over. Her eyes narrowed. Why? Should I? Because you have no right barging into my home and making demands. Find the man you left me for. Oh, wait. He tilted his head, his voice laced with disdain. You can't. He's married now, isn't he? Rachel's face flushed with anger, but before she could spit back, Imani stepped forward. Her tone was sharp and unwavering. Who told you about us? Because we haven't said a word to anyone. Rachel's eyes flickered, and Imani saw the truth before she even spoke. It was Luther, Imani said firmly. Rachel sneered. Well, I'm not going anywhere. He's mine. Imani stepped closer, her presence radiating strength. No, Rachel, you lost your chance. He's mine now, and if I see you near him again, I will make your life hell. Do I make myself clear? Her voice sharpened, cutting through the tension like a blade. Check out my social media account. I don't play. Rachel scoffed. You can't please him like I can. Imani's grin was wide, unbothered, even teasing. I did last night, and this morning, and I will again after you leave. Rachel's eyes widened, her face flushing scarlet. She spun toward Westley as if expecting him to deny it, to defend her. But instead, Westley chuckled, shaking his head. Rachel gasped, fury twisting her features, and with a loud stomp of her heels, she stormed toward the elevator, the doors sliding shut behind her. The room was silent for a moment before both Westley and Imani burst into laughter. "I can't believe you said that to her," Westley said between chuckles. Imani shrugged, feigning innocence. "People like her need to be knocked down a peg or two. Nothing humiliates quite like the truth." Wesley's laughter softened, his gaze warming as he stepped closer. "You know," he said with a playful smirk, "I can't wait until the day when you really do please me like that." Imani raised her hand, eyes twinkling with amusement, but her tone firm. "Not until there's a ring here." Wesley's grin turned serious, his voice dropping low. "That can happen." Her breath caught, her eyes locking with his. In that moment, the chaos of Rachel and Luther melted away, leaving only two people standing on the edge of something real, something that had been building from the moment they'd locked eyes at that fundraiser. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of the community center, where Imani had just wrapped up her financial literacy class. She was gathering her notes, a faint smile on her face from the energy of her students, when a shadow slipped around the corner. Her heart lurched. "Luther!" she gasped, taking a step back. He moved closer, his eyes hard, his voice low. "I came to claim what's mine." Imani's chest tightened. "Go away. We both know what this was. You saw me as a meal ticket to your success. But that's over. I'm with Westley now, and I'm not leaving him." His jaw clenched, and in one sudden movement he grabbed her arm. "You think you can just walk away from me?" Imani yanked against his grip, fear flashing in her eyes, just as a blur of motion erupted from the hallway. One of the security team Westley had quietly assigned to her slammed Luther against the wall, pinning his arm behind his back with practiced force. "Back off!" the guard growled. Luther struggled, his face contorted with rage. But the man held him firm. Another guard appeared, his voice calm but firm. "The police are on their way, and yes, we will be pressing charges." Imani's knees felt shaky, but she lifted her chin, refusing to let Luther see her fear. His eyes darted toward her, full of venom. "You'll regret this, Imani." "No," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "The only thing I regret is not walking away sooner." Minutes later, the flashing red and blue lights of the police cars painted the sidewalk outside. Officers cuffed Luther and read him his rights as he spat curses under his breath. His words grew smaller with every step toward the patrol car, and then Westley was there, striding through the doors, his eyes immediately locking onto her. He closed the space quickly, hands brushing her shoulders. "Are you all right?" Imani swallowed, forcing a small smile. "Yes, a little scared, but all right, thanks to the security team. I'm glad you didn't listen to me when I said I didn't need them." Wesley's expression softened, though his jaw was still tight with anger. "You'll never face him alone again, not while I'm here." Imani let out a slow breath, glancing toward the doors where Luther had disappeared. "I wonder how he's going to explain all this to his pregnant girlfriend." Westley gave a dry, humorless laugh, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "That's his mess to deal with. Ours is building something better together." And for the first time, she truly believed they could. The following weeks tested Westley and Imani's new relationship in ways neither had anticipated. Rachel made it her mission to stir chaos, leaking old photos of her and Westley to gossip blogs, hinting in interviews that she was still the one, and planting rumors that Imani was nothing more than a gold digger. But Rachel had underestimated Imani. She was no stranger to the spotlight. Her non-profit work and commanding presence at conferences had already earned her a reputation. She wasn't a hanger-on, she was a name in her own right. When whispers started, Imani didn't hide. She doubled down on her work, letting her impact speak for itself. Westley, meanwhile, was unabashed. At dinners, meetings, and interviews, he proudly declared his feelings for Imani. "She's not just the woman I love. She's my partner, in life and in everything that matters." It wasn't long before the city began to embrace them as one of its most captivating power couples. Soon, they weren't just in the headlines, they were trending, the hottest couple in town. The night of the gala shimmered with opulence, crystal chandeliers, velvet drapes, and a ballroom alive with laughter and clinking champagne glasses. Westley and Imani arrived arm in arm, heads turning as they walked. Imani wore a sleek silver gown that reflected the lights like liquid moonlight, while Westley's classic tuxedo only emphasized how naturally they fit together. Of course, Rachel couldn't resist. She appeared near the center of the ballroom, her voice rising above the hum of conversation. "So, how long will you keep playing house with this woman?" She spat. Fury etched across her face. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras lifted, whispers swirled. Imani felt Westley tense beside her, but before he could speak, she placed a hand on his arm and stepped forward, her posture regal, her voice clear. "Rachel, we have been trying to keep this quiet," Imani said smoothly, her smile sharp as glass. "We needed time to simply enjoy us. But since you insist on making noise—" She glanced deliberately at the crowd, then turned. Back to Rachel. "You can be the first to congratulate us." Rachel blinked, her face twisting. "Congratulate you? On what?" Imani's smile widened, glowing with both defiance and triumph. "We're engaged. I will soon become Mrs. Westley Brooks." The room erupted in gasps, people craning their necks to catch every detail. Rachel's jaw dropped, her voice rising into a hiss. "You're lying!" But before the accusation could hang in the air, Westley stepped forward, his expression resolute. He reached into his jacket pocket, and the ballroom seemed to still. "Not a lie," he said, his voice carrying. Then, in front of everyone, including Rachel, he dropped to one knee, a velvet box in hand. "Imani Hilton, will you marry me?" For a heartbeat, Imani forgot the crowd, forgot Rachel. All she saw was Westley, his eyes steady, his love undeniable. Her chest tightened, overflowing with joy. She leaned down, kissed him, deep and unapologetic. And when she pulled back, she said clearly, "Yes." The ballroom erupted in cheers, applause echoing off the gilded walls. Rachel stood frozen, fury and disbelief painted across her face, as Westley slid the ring onto Imani's finger. Arm in arm, they rose together, smiling as flashes from cameras lit the room. Rachel hissed one last time, but her voice was drowned by the roar of celebration. Tonight, Westley and Imani hadn't just won, they had claimed their future in front of everyone. The days after the gala felt like a dream. Headlines blazed with their story. The power couple engaged, Westley Brooks and Imani Hilton set to wed. Photos of Westley on one knee, Imani's radiant smile, and the kiss that sealed it were plastered across magazines and news sites. But the true celebration came later, at a private event hosted in Westley's penthouse. Imani moved through the crowd, her silver engagement ring catching the light as she hugged her parents. Her mother whispered, "We always knew you'd find someone who saw you for who you are." Tears welled in Imani's eyes as she squeezed her hand. Across the room, Westley was surrounded by longtime friends from his company, men and women who had seen him weather scandals, late nights, and personal failures. For the first time, he wasn't just the CEO. They saw him as a man in love. When he finally found his way back to Imani's side, he pulled her close. "You're glowing," he murmured, kissing her temple. She smiled, teasing. "That's just good lighting." "No," he said, his voice warm and certain. "That's you. Happiness looks good on you." Guests soon gathered as one of Westley's closest friends tapped a glass for attention. "To the future Mr. and Mrs. Brooks," he declared. Cheers erupted, champagne flutes raised high. Imani laughed as Westley slipped his arm around her waist. "Want to say something?" she whispered. He nodded, his gaze sweeping the room before settling back on her. "For years, I thought success meant everything, but it means nothing without someone to share it with. Imani, you've reminded me what matters most. Partnership, laughter, love. I can't wait to build the rest of my life with you." The room applauded, but Imani leaned into him, her voice soft. "You almost made me cry in front of all these people." That was the point, he teased. Later, as the party wound down, Westley and Imani slipped onto the balcony, the city sprawling beneath them, like a sea of stars. The cool night air wrapped around them as they stood in silence for a moment, simply taking it all in. Imani leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "I never thought I'd be here again, trusting someone this much." Westley kissed the top of her head, tightening his arm around her. "You're not here by accident, Imani. You're here because you chose me, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice." Her lips curved into a smile. "Careful. Westley Brooks, you're setting the bar high." He grinned, pressing a kiss to her lips. "Exactly where it should be." And with the city lights twinkling below, they celebrated not just their engagement, but the promise of a future built together. 4 months later, the morning of the wedding dawned clear, sunlight streaming across the skyline as the city seemed to pause for them. The venue, a grand hall overlooking the river, had been transformed into a dreamscape of white roses, crystal chandeliers, and golden accents that shimmered. Like promises, Imani stood before the mirror in her bridal suite, the satin of her gown flowing like liquid ivory around her. Her veil was pinned delicately in place, and diamonds glimmered faintly at her ears. She took a deep breath, nerves and joy swirling together. Her mother touched her shoulder gently. "You look like everything you were meant to be, baby girl. Strong, radiant, ready." Imani smiled, blinking back tears. "I never thought I'd find this again, Mama, but with Westley, it feels right. Like home." Across the hall, Westley adjusted his tie, his reflection in the mirror wearing the same calm determination he carried in boardrooms. But this wasn't about business. This was the most personal vow of his life. His best man clapped him on the back. "You look like a man who knows exactly what he wants." Westley smirked. "That's because I do." When the music swelled, the guests rose, turning as Imani appeared at the head of the aisle. The room seemed to hold its breath. Westley's chest tightened as his eyes found hers. She moved with grace, each step carrying her closer, and by the time she reached him, his hands itched to pull her close. "You're beautiful," he whispered when she took his hand. "And you're mine," she replied softly, her smile trembling with joy. The officiant began, speaking words of love and commitment. But for Westley and Imani, the world narrowed to just them. They exchanged vows, not as a performance, but as promises carved from truth. "I thought I knew success," Westley said, his voice thick with emotion. "But without you, I had nothing worth coming home to. I promised to honor you, protect you, and cherish you, not as the woman beside me, but as the woman who completes me." Imani's eyes shimmered as she spoke. "I spent years searching for my strength, for my purpose, and then you reminded me that love doesn't weaken, it empowers. I promised to stand with you, to fight with you, and to build a life worthy of the love we share." When the rings were exchanged, his hand steady and hers trembling slightly, the room erupted into cheers as the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. Westley didn't wait. He kissed her deeply, unapologetically, and the applause swelled into a roar. Cameras flashed, guests cheered, and yet all Imani felt was his lips, his arms, and the truth that they were finally bound together. The reception glittered with laughter, toasts, and music. Guests danced, glasses clinked, and the city's most powerful figures mingled with Imani's non-profit family. Rachel and Luther were nowhere to be seen, their shadows irrelevant against the glow of this day. Later, under the glow of fairy lights strung across the terrace, Westley pulled Imani into a quiet corner. The sound of the party drifted behind them, but here it was only the two of them. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, his voice husky, testing the name on his tongue. Imani laughed, eyes sparkling. "Say it again." He kissed her hand reverently. Mrs. Westley Brooks. She leaned in, pressing her forehead to his. That has a nice ring to it, and with the river shimmering beneath the moonlight, they began their new chapter. Two hearts that had weathered storms, choosing forever with no apologies, no doubts, and nothing but love. Hope you enjoyed this wonderful story by Green Tea Tales. Help support our channel with like, comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.